Hello, Internet. Thank you for joining us for this special discussion. Yes, wave hello, everyone. Before we get started, I want to thank our season sponsors, Lurs Bjornsson Artwork and Amory Hospital and Clinic. Thank you so very much. I am lucky to be here with our four actors who provided a wonderful rendition of Nora's monologue from the ends of a doll's house. First off, thank you all for doing that work. It was really fun to watch, and I'm excited to talk about this. Why don't we all just quickly introduce ourselves, starting with Megan.
Hi, my name is Megan Hanks, coming to you from St. Croix Falls.
I'm Isaac Bond. I'm coming to you from St. Croix Falls. Ben?
I'm Ben Qualley, coming from Itasca, Minnesota, and this is Ginger the cat. She'll be in the background, apparently.
Jason, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jason Richards. I am coming to you from downtown St. Croix Falls.
And Erika.
Hello, I'm Erika Kuhn, and I am in St. Paul.
Nice. So this putting together these monologues and then talking about it is really about shared content and artistic interpretation, and how each of us as performers sort of bring ourselves or our own interpretations and our own preparation of material into the performances we give. So, classics like A Doll's House have been performed by probably literally thousands of actors. So I think it's interesting that it's shared content, and I thought we could put together something and talk about what it's like. So having said all that, now that you all have put together this monologue on your own and then watched each other's work, well, are there any sort of gut reactions to this sort of quick project, or anything you're dying to talk about before we start diving into the individual monologues?
I think something that I thought was interesting, that especially kind of coming into it in this kind of blind approach where we're all kind of recording separately and then coming back together, was seeing moments that were kind of similar with the interpretations that each of us had of similar beats of, no matter how it's written, actors kind of pick up on certain things. But then it's really interesting to see the nuances of character comes out with just little emphasis, like little emphases that people put on specific words or phrases or beats. So it was really cool to kind of all do it separately and then come and compare them together in that sense.
Yeah, I think that I noticed definitely one of those moments that I felt like I saw in everybody's monologue was the line, "I'm really not quite sure which." When Nora says, "I think sometimes the one and sometimes the other, I'm really not quite sure which." And all of us seem to have a real genuine honesty to that line about, I'm not sure, I don't know. And I think that's because as actors, we all just realize, yeah, she's being honest right now. This is a moment in her life where he or she is saying something important that hasn't been said before. And it's kind of a discovery. It's a self-recognition moment. And it was cool to see that we all decided to do that.
Yeah, I thought in that moment that as an actor, I did not like that line. And so I did not know what to do with it. So I just played it as, I don't know what to do with this. The same way that Nora is like, I don't know what to do with this.
One of my gut things that I kind of noticed and thought about was, for me, preparing just a monologue versus a role and then doing a self-tape is, in my brain and gut instincts, it's synonymous with an audition. And so this isn't an audition though. And we all know the play. And so that's kind of a different scenario. So I don't know if there's a moment later or right now, but I find it really curious, like taking different takes and kind of directing myself and being like, well, what if you do tweak that? Well, what if you put this flavor on top of this new run of it? And I think obviously that came out in the take that we chose to like give over and kind of submit to Isaac, but it's not an audition. So the idea of like unpacking how we made those calls and kind of why we did what we did and what our process was, I think is like a really fascinating thing that actors don't usually talk about.
Yeah,
I totally agree. I think too with I mean, whether or not it is an audition or just for fun, I think the difference between a role in a play and a monologue is that a monologue really, it exists on its own. And so like personally, I wasn't really invested in, okay, is this the way that Nora would say this at this point in the play? It was more about making the monologue interesting and have its own little mini story from start to finish, which is what you do, you know, in an audition as well. But it's really nice to be freed from the play when you're doing monologue work in a way that you can just make decisions and just throw lines out because nobody has to respond to you. So you can just go nuts.
I found it difficult in the recording of it to settle on one thought per moment, because I knew that there were going to be 3 other versions. And so I thought, am I choosing all the right moments personally for me? Because there'll be 3 other editions that we all get to see. And will someone look at this and go, oh, clearly B is the way to go and you chose C. I'm not sure why you did that. So all those things go through your mind. And sometimes they go through your mind during the recording and you're like, I don't know. I don't know where I am. And you stop and you have to start over again, sort of a thing.
I think something that was really interesting to see, especially with kind of how each of these monologues was kind of like we've been talking about, kind of in a vacuum. There's not the rest of the show or a director involved. I think there's a really interesting amount of individuality of, you can kind of see little bits of each of the actors in their own personal style, but also something I experienced was like, I was able to bring the emotions that I was feeling in the day that I recorded into what I was saying in a way that I probably wouldn't have had that same creative freedom if it was within the scope of like a bigger show. So I think that's always really interesting in watching monologues and seeing how different actors interpret different things, is seeing their own personality kind of shine through in that sense. I think it's really fascinating to watch.
Okay, let's just go through these monologues individually. We're going to start with Megan, and I will share my screen.
Hi, I'm Megan Hanks, and this is Nora from A Doll's House. You have never loved me. You have only thought it pleasant to be in love with me. It is perfectly true, Torvald. When I was at home with Papa, he told me his opinion about everything. And so I had the same opinions. And if I differed from him, I concealed the fact because he would not have liked it. He called me his doll child. And he played with me just as I used to play with my dolls. And when I came to live with you, I mean that I was simply transferred from Papa's hands into yours. You arranged everything according to your own taste, and so I got the same tastes as you. Else, I pretended to. I'm really not quite sure which. I think sometimes the one and sometimes the other. When I look back on it, it seems to me as if I had been living here like a poor woman, just from hand to mouth. I have existed merely to perform tricks for you, Torvald, but you would have it so. You and Papa committed a great sin against me. It is your fault that I have made nothing of my life.
Okay, so quick observations or thoughts about watching that or having watched it earlier. That was Megan's wonderful take on Nora.
I wrote down like just an initial impression about everybody's, just like after the first watch through. And like the first thing I thought of with Megan's take was like, this is very of the era. Like, you know, because you did a slate in your take, you know, we got to hear kind of like 2020 Megan. And then when you dropped into Nora, like that was a character switch, you know, your voice was a certain way. You had the strain of that, you know, early kind of energy of that character from the first half of the play found its way into this closing monologue. And I just, in general, because I've seen you now in several roles, you know, throughout several different decades or eras or whatever, I thought that your use of your voice was very, very noticeable and just like a great choice all around.
Thank you so much. That's so nice.
Something that I took note of that especially in going back and watching it more than once, that I really enjoyed was kind of the building of emotion, especially in how you took it in there's kind of a sense of this kind of restricted control in the beginning of this is all the things that she's feeling and wanting to say, and then that just grows and grows in a way that's really enticing and kind of pulls me in, which I think is really it's really dynamic, really cool to see.
When I was recording mine, I was reminded of it when watching Megan. My first question when I was starting it was like, well, where should I look? Am I looking like at myself straight into the camera, which was odd to see yourself acting right in your own face, or do I look to the side or up? And it was a big question for me, and I kind of tried different ways, and I don't know if I liked any of them, but that was the thing that I noticed about Megan. She looked up as if there was actually a person there who was a little bit taller than her, and then when I saw that, it made me think, oh, it really doesn't matter. Just commit to whatever you're doing, and it'll be correct.
Yeah, your points of like focus and attention were just like very, very specific, and so it made each thought unit that rolled into the other, it made a clear little connect the dot of like, oh, because of her dad, oh, because of her husband, like we could keep going through that, which is just like, it's the best when you can see someone go through it. So yeah, I agree exactly with that kind of like focus point.
Like in the beginning of your monologue, I got almost like a sense of wonder or like great discovery, and it seemed like this is a monologue, but your scene partner is Torvald, and the way that you delivered it to Torvald at first almost seemed empathetic, like I really want you to understand. And then, like Ben said, as the monologue was going on, I sensed like a growing unhinged or getting worked up by this sort of self-discovery. So there was a real journey from like a sense of wonder to like feeling just bewildered by this discovery, and not unhinged, but a little out of control of your emotions. So, Megan, when you were putting together this monologue and working on it, what were things about the monologue or like choices that you tried to make in putting it together? What really came off of the page into your mind?
Yeah, actually, I love what you guys are saying, because those are really the things that I focused on the most while I was planning this monologue and the delivery. I think we all kind of know that the last line of this monologue has to hit hard. It's the point of this monologue. And so just like you guys were saying, I wanted to start with a sort of abeyance, a sort of demure, I don't want to say ingenue, but yeah, I wanted to represent Nora at the first half of the play and the woman that Nora has been her whole life up to this point. And then to ride the pacing of that monologue into that kind of unhinged, into that final explosive last line. That's like, this is it. You've thought about this before and it's happening now. And I think that when we think about Nora, we think about her as sort of a feminist icon from like the 1800s, because when A Doll's House came out and a character like Nora was introduced to people, it was unheard of. You don't leave your husband. You don't talk about these things. So I wanted her strength to be there, but more so than that, I wanted to play up, like we were talking about, that sort of periodness, that sort of, this is who I am and this is who I was raised to be, fragility that Nora has as well. So I really am happy that came across. And I think I really wanted to place Papa in space as well. Obviously he wasn't there, but I knew the first moment that I read the monologue, Papa has to exist in Nora's memory aside from Torvald, so that when I'm remembering him and speaking of him, that sort of reaction can exist and give the monologue another level. So yeah, I mean, those were the things that were that I thought about at first, was how do I make this monologue? How do I play with the pacing of it so that the last line really hits? And how can I place my ideas in space so that you can see Nora's whole life in this short period of time?
Cool. Well, thank you. And thank you for
Yeah,
reading the
thank
verse.
you. That was really fun. Thank you guys.
You have never loved me. You have only thought it pleasant to be in love with me. It's perfectly true, Torvald. When I was at home with Papa, he told me his opinions about everything, and so I had the same opinions. And if I differed from him, I concealed the fact because he would not have liked it. He called me his doll child, and he played with me just as I would play with my dolls. And when I came to live with you, I mean that I was simply transferred from Papa's hands into yours. You arranged everything according to your own tastes. So I got the same taste as you, or I pretended to. I'm really not quite sure which. I think sometimes the one and sometimes the other. When I look back on it, it seems to me as if I've been living here like a poor woman, from hand to mouth. I've existed merely to perform tricks for you, Torvald. But you would have it so. You and Papa have committed a great sin against me. It is your fault I have made nothing of my life.
It was so calm. It must have been terrifying to Torvald to have her so calm and like, I've made some decisions and now I'm telling you what those decisions are. You're not going to have a say in this. I'm going to say all the things I want to say, and then I'm going to walk out the door.
Mm-hmm. For Ben's, I kind of did what Erika did, where I wrote down just like gut reactions. And what I wrote down for Ben was pain and exhaustion. Mm-hmm. Very stoic and mm-hmm. assured. Like he's thought about this so many times and the moment is here. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think that there was just a sort of like surrendering to the situation. Like, I am so over this. And through that, I got more of like a modern feel from the monologue. It almost felt like, is Ben breaking up with me right now? It was very honest. It was very painful. And I really liked that.
Yeah, I found that of all the takes, like the first word that I thought of, first impression, like how I had for Megan's, was just very resolved. And so oddly enough, that patience and that resolve reminded me of this thing that I think it's very easy to forget about Nora, which is she is a mother. And so like, you know how when you just, I think Megan used the word exhaustion just now, like when you wear out your mom, maybe growing up or something. And so then she goes to that kind of low, quiet place. And that's when like in your belly, it's so much scarier than anyone yelling at you. Like this really had that, I had written down resigned and then resolve, because I think much like we talked about that very authentic questioning moment, we all had a moment at the end of the shift into, and I've said what I need to say, this is the mic drop, I'm out. And so yours had a very like, I'm very resigned, I'm done. And then the resolve to leave. And yeah, I just like this, for me, the mother's instinct of Nora, of someone who must be patient and someone who must deal with so much, that really shone through in this take.
I was kind of noticing like how are these monologues being delivered to Torvald, and this one was very, very matter of fact, and I wrote down it's explaining but with no room for argument. Like, this is how it is, which is kind of what Jason said as well. I also noticed like there's that great line, you and Papa have committed a great sin against me. Everybody had like a wonderful different take on that line. Yours was very, very quick and very, very almost like a very quiet punch. Like it was just like it was the fastest delivered out of them, and it's like it's kind of a gutting line to hear from your significant other, and I found yours very quick and punchy. Ben, so when you were putting together this monologue, what were some things, some choices that you felt like you were making, or what were some of the words that were popping out to you? Tell us about your process a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of like with what you guys were mentioning and a little bit of what we were talking about earlier. When I was first approaching it, I was trying to come at it with this very big scope of of, oh, how is Torvald reacting to this? How am I affecting him? How does this fit into the character? How does this fit into the show? And I found myself kind of getting bogged down in a lot of that, especially because, like, with what Jason was talking about earlier, or I forget who it was, but it's that it's very cold. It's just me. So after that, I kind of decided, okay, I'm just going to try to take it back down just to the language of it and see how that affects me and see how I connect with that, and try to use kind of that instinct rather than trying to find an external source. So yeah, once I kind of felt that, it was a lot more pulled back, which I didn't like at first, but it felt a lot more genuine. So I felt more comfortable with that as recording.
Okay, well, thank you, Ben.
You have never loved me. You've only thought it pleasant to be in love with me. It is perfectly true, Torvald. When I was at home with Papa, he told me his opinion about everything, and so I had the same opinions, and if I differed from him, I concealed the fact because he would not have liked it. He called me his doll child, and he played with me, just as I used to play with my dolls. And when I came to live with you, I simply mean that I was transferred from Papa's hands into yours. You arranged everything according to your own taste, and so I got the same tastes as you, else I pretended to. I'm really not quite sure which. I think sometimes the one and sometimes the other. When I look back on it, it seems to me as if I have been living here like a poor woman, just from hand to mouth. I have existed merely to perform tricks for you, Torvald. But you would have it so. You and Papa have committed a great sin against me. It is your fault that I have made nothing of my life.
I really enjoyed the way you chose to group the words into thoughts. Not necessarily, this is a full sentence, period, but to break that up into thoughts, and we don't necessarily think in full sentences or speak in full sentences. We just have thoughts, and they come out in their own organic way. And I just like the way you chose to break up the monologue in different ways than any other person that I've seen, on the panel here do it. And it brought out different. It just brought out a different Nora that I don't know. I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
This one also had sort of a more modern feel to me, a little bit more like, I totally recognize that cadence right away. That sort of, I'm finishing a sentence and now I'm starting another sentence, and then I'm going to think and I'm going to finish this sentence, and here's what I really want to say. And it gave her a real strength and a real rage, and I think that was super apparent just from the get-go. It felt like this laser focus, which gave Nora that feminist glory that I did the opposite of in my monologue. And so it was really great to see that come through, like powerhouse Nora. Yeah, that's what I have to say about it.
Something that I think was really interesting with this one is that it was very direct of an energy, and it might have also just been because you were looking at the camera, and me as the actor was like, oh, I am Torvald in this sense, but there was an intensity and a way that you really, I would use the word like chewed through the language of every word. All of the sounds were there, and it made it really gritty and serious in a way that made it really intentional with what you were saying. So in that sense, yeah, it was a really good energy. And another thing I wanted to say was there is a way that the way that you said in the line of you arranged everything according to your own taste. You put a different subtext on you arranged everything than the rest of us did. And it was in a way that like it hit me in a way that I was like, I hadn't considered doing that, of like just in the simple cadence of how you did it. And I think that was the moment where I was like, oh my gosh, that was a missed opportunity by me. That's so cool that she like picked up on a little nuance there, that was a part of her story in a way that it wasn't a part of the story that I told it when I did it. Which I just liked, and ripping apart the text and finding that.
EK, you have a softness about you that I think Nora has as well, and I enjoy seeing you push through that into some anger that I think Nora would have to do as well, because we're supposed to see Nora as this little pretty bird that flits around and eats sweets and those kind of things, but when she's determined, that's a different Nora, and she has to push through this. I mean, like I guess like Ben was saying, I felt like I was Torvald in that. And so I'm just seeing this sweet little soft face, and then all of a sudden this big dragon punch comes out of it. I'm like, oh, that's a whole different thing that's happening. And it just was making me reel a bit as because Torvald is like a bucket list role for me. I would love to play it. And then sitting here watching you do that, I was thinking, what do I do as Torvald? How do I come back to that? And I don't know, I liked that kind of feeling.
Yeah, there's a couple words shared by everyone. Megan said rage. I definitely felt the rage being brought to Torvald. I thought that it changed between rage and disgust and also sadness, like multiple times throughout the monologue. And disgust definitely came out. I think the moment that Ben talked about was really a moment of disgust, of like, you did this to me, Torvald. It felt like you were disgusted. So I liked that sense of disgust. Okay, Erika, so when you were putting this together, when you were working on the words, what came off of the page for you? What are some choices you were thinking about?
I just appreciated everything that everyone said so much. My process for me was just like, I wish you guys could understand how different a bunch of my takes were, and how I wasn't sure, kind of like what Jason said earlier, like what the right ways you could do it was. So I did the one that I thought, I kind of put my audition monologue self-tape brain back on, was like, what plays the Erika strength? And the Erika strength, like Megan pointed out, is more contemporary. Like when I saw Meg start, I was like, oh yes, she did the other way that like you could definitely do, for the theater that's doing the buttoned up collar versus the ambiguous gray tones. What year is it? I don't know. And so like, it's such a good monologue. It's like a bucket list. I equate this monologue in my like actor vision board with kind of like Nina's exit monologue on the Seagull. There's this beautiful thing that started back in the day where like women would just kind of go through it the whole time and then just get this awesome exit speech where they're like, this is what it was, and I'm out and I'm leaving, and you can deal with that, you can shoot yourself, you can come after me, you can do whatever. So like the monologue is so good, and it's hard to know, kind of like, I don't remember which of you said it in the beginning, Nora changes. And so when you're playing the game of, is this the monologue that's a piece of a play, you can really like choose your own adventure with where you start. So like part of me was like, okay, it starts very cold, it builds up, or within the context of the scene, Torvald's been just like running his mouth at this point. She's kind of like, at the end, she's like, okay, sit down, and like, that's beautiful. But for me, I'm just a big bag of water as a person. So like, you do that opening thought unit, which I think Jason pointed out, or someone, that the units were very clear. That's my process for like any speech, is just like the thought units, what they actually mean at the bottom of it, and why. And the opening thought unit of just the beginning of this arc you're going on is, you've never loved me, you like the idea of me, which is just like, how do you not start crying? And so in a bunch of my takes, I like start from crying, and I was kind of like, no, I don't know if that's where she starts. And so I was kind of all over the place, popped off this one, but it was interesting and satisfying to know that you guys picked up on all of those small, changes and all of those small tweaks, and that does actually mean something, and it does pay off when you do kind of like hone in on those moments, because it does change, how Ben understood that line. It changed how Ben understood that line, because on that take, I remembered that when Erika gets angry, sometimes I'll laugh, which is just a reaction I have. Like sometimes I cry when I laugh, and I laugh when I cry. And so like, that's a kind of a contemporary thing that came out, I think you spoke about. And it's just like, I don't think I did that on any other take. And so it's nice knowing that even those small things that you're just like, kind of obsessing over or just like discovering have an impact. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jason Richards. This is Nora from A Doll's House. You have never loved me. You have only thought it pleasant to be in love with me. It's perfectly true, Torvald. When I was at home with Papa, he told me his opinions about everything, and so I had the same opinions. And if I differed from him, then I concealed the fact because he would not have liked it. He called me his doll child, and he played with me as I used to play with my dolls. And when I came to live with you, I mean that I was simply transferred from Papa's hands into yours. You arranged everything according to your own taste, and so I got the same taste as you, else I pretended to. I'm really not quite sure which. I think sometimes the one and sometimes the other. When I look back on it, it seems to me as if I had been living here like a poor woman, just from hand to mouth. I have existed merely to perform tricks for you, Torvald, but you would have it so. You and Papa have committed a great sin against me. It is your fault that I have made nothing of my life.
Kind of like with what we've been talking about of kind of approaching the style of it, I could definitely feel kind of the more classical approach that you brought into this. It was very language focused and compressed in a way that it felt very immediate. I think something that in comparing yours and mine, I was looking and my monologue was somewhere in the range of like 10 or 15 seconds longer than yours. And when I was thinking about it, it kind of made sense of like, okay, in this realm, if this was the show, this is a Nora that needs to talk fast and tell her point before Torvald can get a word in. And that had such an immediacy that was, you couldn't look away. You needed to hear her out. So that intention was really cool. And I think, like I mentioned with Megan before, of her performance was kind of opening this Pandora's box of emotions of these are the things that I've been sitting on. Jason, yours felt more like these are the things that I've been thinking about, and I have been ready to say each and every one of these sentences to you for weeks, months, years, and I'm finally getting the opportunity to. I'm going to say exactly what I've been thinking, and so the immediacy and intent with that was really clear.
Yeah, I wrote down honesty and pacing, great articulation and drive through the monologue. I agree, Ben. I think that gave it more of it took it out of modern times. And you can really see where Jason's Texas Shakespeare life lives, in his acting person, because the focus on the words and letting the words just be there and just exist for what they are, and trusting that this monologue will carry itself through and it'll do the emotional work. It just lays the information out in a way that it doesn't take the emotion away from the monologue. In fact, it enhances it, because it's like bullets getting fired at you, just one after another. And like you said, Ben, it is that idea that, oh no, I've thought about this many times, and here it is. Here's my monologue to you, Torvald. And it felt very honest. It felt strong.
My first instinct word for Jason was just deliberate. Like, this was a true encapsulated exit speech. The hand might be on the door. And in thinking about, where it falls within the scene, like, yeah, the idea that the Torvald has been like, wait, I take it back, I'm kind of monologuing. And that whole time, when I imagine it, Nora is just quiet. And so the idea that this moment before, I know there's some like intercuts before, but this moment before was you sitting there being like, are you done yet? So that I can say this, so I can pick up my coat and go. Like, that really read. The kind of classical things you guys picked up on, I didn't realize that's maybe what I was hearing, but it is because the operative words you used were so specific. And like the way that you would pick out your yous versus your sins versus your this or that, like it really was a really nuanced way to just assign blame in the moment. And I just really appreciated too the idea that this is the exit speech. And so this woman who we've seen, this person who we've seen be so flustered, this is the person who was like dancing badly to the point that her hair fell down to like distract her husband. Like, this person now has become direct and concise and deliberate. And so like that kind of arc, if you're someone who knows and loves the play, is like, ooh, yeah, she got there so she can go. She had to change, So I thought that specificity of just getting out of there and knowing what you mean was kind of like a win, because you know, when you're reading it in 2020, you want her to walk out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like the stillness, just the kind of like in Erika's, but even more so with Jason's, that just like boom, delivery. This is the words, this is it. I'm not adding extra fluff or flair to this. Just let it be. And I think it's funny that you said that you didn't know what to do with the line, I'm really not quite sure, because that was maybe my line, your monologue. I loved that, and I also loved because of your stillness and the stoic delivery of it, any little eyebrow deliveries and like those little movements in your face when you said, it is perfectly true, Torvald. It's like, whoa, that's full of expression, even though this person is really not moving that much. So it's cool how this can counteract and really enhance the tiniest little nuances in a performance.
It was quick pacing. The words were really speaking for themselves. And Jason, you made a point to emphasize poor and sin. You said sin in a really interesting way. You said it like sin, like it really came out like you were disgusted by this word sin. And you know, when you're rapid fire through this dialogue, it you know, we get to watch it over and over again, so we can notice these things. But even at the pace you were going, you found those operative words and you landed on them and made a choice for them. One thing that I noticed, like a shared moment for all four actors, was the "it's perfectly true, Torvald." It was like, in a way, it was like you were all anticipating Torvald is going to interrupt you, so you're just like, "It's perfectly true, Torvald," essentially. So it's just one of these shared moments of you all read the same material and you know this is my reaction to this shared line of dialogue. So while you all, you know, give it your own voice, you all have the same instinct of this is what this line means. This is what's going on right now. So Jason, thank you for putting together a video of this monologue. What were your experiences in putting this together? What words were coming off of the page for you? What were some choices that you made?
Well, when you sent these videos to us earlier today, I watched all of them, and I watched mine again, and I thought, did I send the wrong one? Because it seemed like this is the Nora Smash monologue more so than I intended it to be. She was just angrier than I remember being in the moment recording it. And I think that's probably true of Jason right now. He's just sort of angry and frustrated with, you know, our country and what's going on in the world right now. And that sort of comes out in this monologue. It's just you know, you can't help but put yourself in the monologue, because what else are you going to put in it? So it seemed angrier than what I thought it was going to be in the prep. You know, when I was going over the lines and stuff before I even started recording, like it had a little more nuance than what it did in the final product, but it just came out more angry. But you know, that's sort of where she is. I think I took the monologue in the sense of where it is in the play and the journey this actor has been on, and we are moments away from her walking out the door, and how would she feel in these moments that would give her the courage to turn that knob. That's a different kind of courage than she's had ever. And so maybe there's a moment that she's behaving in a way that she never has before. And I don't know, I like that. I like that Torvald finally lets this be a monologue, you know, because even the monologue here that we have written down on paper, this is not actually a monologue. He does, in fact, break in and say, look, I want to say words now, but we're not interested in his words anymore. We only want to hear what Nora has to say. And so he finally shuts up, and she gets to have time where she speaks for a while. And I wanted that opportunity to really say to him what I've been feeling all this time. And I really enjoyed that as the actor. I do appreciate that you would say that, you know, I chose certain words because I did do that. I went through and say, well, what are words that she really wants to drive home, and then how do you make those words actions, because you don't have anything else but your face, basically, because you're not on stage fully embodying this character. You just have this, you know. And so what can you do? How do you get across that without looking like someone who's doing this the whole time during the monologue, which no one wants to watch that, you know. So you got to have some control over what you do and how that comes out of your body, and it can be really focused on the dialect, not really a dialect, but I don't know, I lost the word, but I think I focused a lot on the words themselves, more so than anything else. After watching that video, it seems pretty clear that that's what I was doing. But I really enjoyed the process of this, to kind of see what everybody else did, and things that, like, you know, like Ben was saying, like, oh, there's a lost moment. I could have done that. That would have been great. Or you think, I did do that in another take, but then I didn't do this in that take. And so I want to put those two takes together. And so the great thing about theater is that you get to come back tomorrow night and try it again, you know. So that's the beauty of it. Like, it's a living art, so to speak.
I thought it was cool and interesting how, to me, it felt like Erika and Jason both had, when they said poor woman, I've been living here like a poor woman, there was a real disdain that I sensed from, like, poor people. Ugh. Like, I don't want to live like that. And then I almost felt like Ben and I had this more of like a, I've been poor. This is like almost like a pain or an empathy to it. And I guess I just was wondering if that was intentional on your part, if it was like that disdain was purposeful.
Thank you for noticing. It definitely was. Nora hates poor people. Like, here's the thing. Like, this is a mic drop speech. Like, yeah, it's fun. But she's at the start of a journey, you know? Like, she's like saying, I'll be poor. But like, she's someone who up until this point has just been like willing to literally kill herself to not be poor. Like, the way that she speaks to her, like, you know, dear friend, and just like she can't control herself. She can't stop eating little sweets. Like, she is not someone who likes poor people. Like, she loves comforts, and like that's why she's kept like a little bird, like a little item, you know. And so while it's like a beautiful part of the speech, like I think someone used the word disgust earlier, and I didn't think to use that word, but that was something I guess I was going for, which is like, you know, I can think of the worst words you could call me that if I repeated would just make my face sour. And I think for Nora, one of the worst things you could do besides calling her ugly would be to call her poor. And so it was just like a quick minute, but I was like, yeah, we need to, like, Nora is not a perfect character either. Like, there's no need to have this be totally like da da da. But yeah, she just hates poor people. There's no way around it. In my impression of the reading, like, that's the whole point. That's why we have this play, is because people didn't want to be poor. It's a play about money, kind of. Like, it's about relationships, and it's about objectification, but it's also about money and means and class. So yeah, thank you for noticing that. I think Nora hates poor people.
Yeah, I agree with all those things. That I think that's why it makes it so exciting when she leaves, and knowing that she is going out to be a poor person. So she's lived here like a poor woman, and she hated that was truth. Hated it so much that she's going to actually go out and actually live like a poor woman. And that's such a bold move. And I think she hated to be poor. And I think for me, the actual word sin is a vulgar word for her. To actually put that word in her mouth and say it is like saying a curse word. And she's like, and she knows that Torvald knows that. So when she says it, it's like, you have pushed me to the point where I'm saying these words, and now I'm doing these actions. And I wanted to put that into the play as well, like choose this word, also like doll child, and how she's really learned how to hate that.
There's something on a different note that I thought was really still interesting, and kind of looking at all of these different variations was just the kind of idea of, okay, the general idea, the words that are there kind of have a similar meaning, but it can be altered depending on how you do it. And in where I really noticed it was the sentence, "You have only thought it pleasant to be in love with me." In each of your monologues, and I think I fell in there somewhere as well, you emphasized a different word and it gave a different meaning to the sentence.
Yeah.
So Megan said, "You only thought it pleasant to be in love with me." Erika said, "You only thought it pleasant to be in love with me." And Jason said, "You only thought it pleasant to be in love with me." And even though it's the same sentence, each of those gives it a little different spin and puts a different kind of emphasis and sting on it in a way that, like, in kind of, when I like stopped and had that realization, I like went back and watched them again, and I was like, oh wow, that's so cool that yeah, you can just tear apart that one sentence that much and it can mean that many different things.
So I think we had all agreed that if we were doing this role in rehearsal, we would have chosen all of those words at one point to emphasize, to sort of go, I wonder which one it'll actually be when we do the performance. Or will it just be sort of a spinning wheel where every night it may be a different way that I say that line, or a different emphasis on whichever word.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, even when I'm doing modern work, I scan a sentence in a way that, I mean, we all do it. We find our operatives, we find the most important words. And one thing that I think is interesting about this monologue is that a lot of times the operative seems to fall on like me or you or him, which as an actor, typically you're taught those are not very interesting words to emphasize. But that's what this monologue is about. And that's where this monologue has to live, is like, this is about my life and how you messed it up, and it's your fault. And I love that the end line, it's almost like it spells it out for you, is like, you need to emphasize everything you can in this last sentence, because it's not just your fault, it's your fault that I have made nothing of my life. Like, all of these words are so important. And so it's so great to just like revel in that and just let the line really hit on every word. It's modern, and yet it's not.
I love that too. There's so many ways you can play it. For me, like, one of the biggest things was just like, which lines are your discovery lines and which lines did you have in your back pocket that you've just been waiting to say? Because like, you can do any of them anyway. You can clump them together. It's like, it's all discovery until I know. Or it's like, I'm accusing you so much that I just figured out that you've committed it. Like, there's so many, you know, like the idea of having to direct this would be like so intense and big to me, because there's, yeah, just like Ben was saying, like, if you play up one bit versus another, you're telling all of these different possibilities. There's like these parallel universes of like what Nora means and what she comes to and when she realizes it. And I mean, like, this monologue could even have stuff stacked onto the beginning and end of it if you took out more of Torvald's little tidbits, right? We've never had a conversation before. Like, even adding that one thought unit onto the beginning would change how we all made our arc. Because suddenly, you've never been in love with me wouldn't be the first thing you thought to say. It'd be like a second little like punch. And so I just think it's so fascinating, you know, all the different ways we could do it, and seeing all of you, yeah, like pick those emphasis and have those different subtexts. Like, there's just so many little infinities of how it could be done, and it was delightful to see all the variations.
Yeah, it's really magical. You know, actor is another word for actor is performing artist, and there really is like an artistry to, like, we are making artistic choices by the second as actors. And I don't know, I guess like a gut reaction to watching shared material is my thoughts of like, okay, when I'm invested in a role and I've done the work and gone through the process, I'm like, this is my role. I'm doing it. This character is mine, but it's not actually mine. It's thousands of other actors who have performed it. No, not all the time. Like, original plays are different, but it's really magical and exciting to see other artists performing things and to see how different it can come out. And I don't know, I find that freeing and exciting to watch.
Yeah, I think with a project like this too, I really just like wanted to have fun with it. Like I typically, I mean, I play stronger women. I tend to get cast with like the deeper voice, the leading lady type, they say, which I don't necessarily agree with typecasting, but I wanted to play up that ingenue nature. I wanted to just do it and like get to do something that I don't usually get cast in. And I knew that I was going to have 3 other great actors deliver something that would be different from what I did. And so it was like, why not? Just have fun, just play it up.
Okay, friends, well, I'm going to stop recording. Thank you all so very much, and thank you, Internet, for coming and joining us on this discussion.
Bye, Internet.
Thanks, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.